Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is S.C. Coleman, author, and this video will be somewhat continuing the context of the last one, which is all about third-party surveillance systems, mainly, with an emphasis on the fact that these third parties, individual entities, individuals, or companies, whichever you would prefer, are based overseas, being they're in a different continent and are all in all respects foreign. So this first document that we're going to look at is from the city of Dunwood, Georgia. Lists an address of 4800 Ashford Dunwoody Road, Dunwoody, Georgia 30338. I think I might have said Dunwood. I meant to say it was Dunwoody. Mike Carlson, chief of police, is in the from. 2 is mayor and city council. January 26th, 2026. Boy, that's a date right there. That would be 01262026, right? Similar to, well, it'd be more interesting if I guess it was February 26, 2026, right? So, this is a technology partnership agreement with PCID, Perimeter Community Improvement District. Boy, that sounds like some nonsense, doesn't it? To fund the installation and operation of gunshot detection systems. Oh, well, it's nice that they're calling it gunshot detection systems. I would have thought that detection systems would have just been to suffice, but of course they have to add gunshot, so it sounds like, as usual, they're doing something noble. Because, of course, gunshots in and of themselves are evil, according to these morons. Live view cameras, and license plate readers. PCID has agreed to a 2-year renewal of the agreement, which is fully funded through the PCID partnership. PCID has committed increased funding to support the installation of additional DFR, or Drone as First Responder, coverage. So I suppose if this drone decides to go into various supermarkets or restaurants, then they should request a first responder discount, right? Considering the, quote, drone is a first responder, and the first responder they're attempting to put in place of the term veteran, because they want to obviously eliminate all military forces that are not controlled by them, and they want everything to be part of this global law enforcement structure, mainly automated in the ultimate goal. I assume there will be some still sort of individual operatives in the force mechanism, but I believe the plan is mostly to have everything automated. This is from Flock Group Incorporated, 1170 Howell Mill Road, Suite 210, Atlanta, Georgia. Oh, well, that's nice. They're stateside, right? Or at least that's what you're supposed to believe. Flock Safety. And they're always playing these word games, using the words like service and safety and health, Accounts payable email. I've never seen that. An email listed for accounts payable. Maybe you can see an accounts payable fax number for where you send invoices and whatnot, but an email, it's kind of odd. Patrick.Creed, that's Kilo, Romeo, India, Echo, Golf, at dunwoodyga.gov. And here it's got all the stuff with the order form and etc. Now what's interesting is that you have Flock Safety add-ons, charge of $0, Flock Safety Platform, a charge of $0, and Flock Safety Professional Services, whatever those are, for $0. So it's all free stuff. They're not going to charge you for it. Of course, one hand washes the other, and will always be somebody who pays the bill, and not necessarily is that payment in money. So one has to wonder exactly why things are being provided so supposedly free of charge. Of course, they are getting a stupid $200,000 for the contract in this particular one, but this is being used simply as an example to understand that these activities are taking place all across the country. Drone as first responder DFR 2.0 systems software includes community engagement dashboard. Now, I would assume that while most of us are supposed to think community engagement means like press conference or some type of dance about explanation, a line essentially explaining away certain events as not to be what they obviously are, right? We've seen quite a bit of that. But I would rather consider community engagement in the terms of the military use of the word engagement. Meaning you have forward engagement, you have engaging the enemy. It is essentially speaking a term for attack. And the Marine Corps doctrine is to close with, or engage with, close with, and destroy the enemy. The initial engagement is the idea of, another term is making contact. It means they shoot and you shoot back, right? That's your engagement, right? Obviously, just simply showing up could be a form of engagement. Either way, it's kind of a nice word for attack. If somebody attacks you and you attack them back, you're still involved in an attack yourself. The opposite of attack, of course, would be run away. And engagement generally, despite the word games, is not used in the context of flight or retreat. Access live 911 calls directly within the Flock OS software. So that means 911 calls now are contained within a third-party software program which has a user and license agreement, and they can essentially do whatever they want. And of course, the most troubling is when you discover that all these third-party entities are based overseas predominantly. They obviously have all their smoke and mirrors and their front system to make it look like it's domestic, but it's not. By executing this order form, customer represents and warrants that it has read and agrees to all the terms and conditions contained in the previously executed agreement, as well as the prepared 911 terms and conditions. So the first part that's troubling is that the so-called public service law enforcement mechanism, the actual tangible and practical control of the communications and everything else, and surveillance, is within the hands of private third parties and their private property. Thus, effectively speaking, they make so-called law enforcement into their private property. But after the fact that they're third-party private interests, you of course have the fact that there are foreign interests. And then on top of that, when you really get into the details, you discover what the real motive for these activities actually is. But we're not going to get to that quite yet. First, we need to look at GPS Live, online business and consumer goods services and digital content terms and conditions. You will have different rights under these terms depending on whether you are a business or consumer. A consumer if you are an individual buying products for personal use. So they put two categories. Business is somebody who's obviously not buying products for personal use and is not an individual. I assume if you're an individual but not buying products for personal use, you still qualify as a quote consumer. And whenever you see that stipulation, you understand that it's coming from the perspective of an evil perspective of the degradation of individual rights, for one, and second, that the legal fictitious entity structure should be leveraged over rather than subject to individual human interests. It is a perspective that's inimical to life and all things that are living. If you are a business customer, these terms constitute the entire agreement between us in relation to your purchase and supersedes any and all previous agreements, and that you shall have no claim for innocent or negligent misrepresentation or negligent misstatement based on any statement in this agreement. Who would include something like that? That's crazy. That's saying we can lie and say whatever we want, and you can't do anything about it. I mean, why would somebody write that? It's, you know. So we've got REM Trading Limited as Rewire Security, registered in England and Wales. Registered office is at first floor Nelson House, George Mann Road, Leeds, England, LS10 1DJOUR. It's got some numbers here, registered VAT number, etc. Not very important. And also at the address Unit 3, Avon Valley Business Park, St. Anne's Road, Bristol, England, BS4 4EU. We supply digital content on a subscription basis. Expiry, that's of course not standard American English, so to speak. Expiry instead of expiration. A subscription for digital content will automatically renew on the same terms and for the same time period. If you wish to make a change to the product you have ordered, please contact us. We will let you know if the change is possible. So basically, you have to ask permission with these people according to their phony agreement. And that also sort of speaks to the perspective of the hands writing this paperwork. Our rights to make changes, we may change the product to implement minor technical adjustments and improvements, for example, to address a security threat. So there's obviously the pretext they would use to say, impose their own, basically anything they want. And considering the motive and mechanism behind this, it really could be anything that they want. And in every sense of the term, I don't think anybody would like it. We may update or require you to update digital content. Some products will be manufactured by a third party, of course. Some services, such as installation of the goods, may be provided by a third party. This is actually written incorrectly because it really says some services, such as installation of the goods, may be provided a third party. Obviously missing the word by, but this is a very, this is not a complicated document, so to speak. So having a typo like that is kind of odd. Delivery of the goods will be undertaken by appropriate third party. If you do not allow us to access to provide services, if you do not allow us or the installers access to your property, we may end the contract and clause 11.2 will apply. And not sure we've gotten to clause 11.2 quite yet. What will happen if you do not give required information to us? If you do not give us or the installers the information within a reasonable time of us or the installers asking for it, or if you give us or the installers incomplete or incorrect information, we may end the contract and clause 11.2 will apply, or make an additional charge of reasonable sum to compensate us. So obviously clause 11.2 has to do with charging charges as a form of coercive extortion. Essentially, they're saying, if you don't do what we say or do what we want, we will bill you and end the contract. But they're written in the beginning, they say they can, essentially speaking, lie and steal and do whatever they want, and you can't do anything about it, according to this phony contract. Sharing of information with third parties, you permit us to share any contact information supplied by the you. So the word the is added. It should be just supplied by you, but here it says supplied by the you, which is kind of an odd typo, to be honest. That's a little weird. ending the contract because of something we have done or are going to do. Or are going to do. There is a risk that supply of the products may be significantly delayed because of events outside our control. That's what you call force majeure, but they always love to play that down because these come from arrogant, narcissistic, and contemptuous perspectives of people who don't like to recognize their own failings or the fact that they could be outside the control of something. They always term things that they're in control and that they're the so-called masters or overlords, and anything to the contrary they attempt to diminish or demean in their wording, to pretend like either it's insignificant or it's not, or somehow it doesn't really exist. They will bend over backwards to explain how the force occupation, which is greater than theirs and simply will not allow them to operate, is somehow non-existent or not a big deal, right? Or the storm which destroyed their equipment is simply a minor hiccup, right? They always have these ways to explain it and diminish it and say, oh yeah, no, it's no problem. When consumers do not have a right to change their minds. You just love this. The digital products, after you have started to download or stream these services, once these have been completed, even if the cancellation period is still running, goods will have been modified or altered. Any products which become mixed inseparably with other items after their delivery. That is a weird section. The contract for services is completed when we have finished providing the services and you have paid for them. If you want to end the contract will not end until the next payment due date, which falls at least 1 calendar month after the day on which you contact us. Doesn't that sound contradictory? If they say that the contract will end after the services have been provided and they've been paid for, then wouldn't that mean the contract ended? So why would you need to end the contract after that? And why would the contract continue if here it just said that it ends after the services have been provided or have been finished being provided and they've been paid for? Sort of odd. And they also mentioned that they do not offer refunds. Despite the fact there's a whole bunch of sections in here talking about refunds, there is one section where it specifically states we do not offer refunds. So you would go through this contract ignorantly as a so-called consumer. I doubt that any of the quote-unquote business customers would do this because all of those are fictitious entities and they're completely bureaucratic and probably lead back to the same individuals that control this company. Well, if you're the regular ignorant consumer, then you will go and read through this and see all of these sections. And then when you make a claim to them, they will pull out one small little embedded section such as, we do not accept refunds, and throw that in your face. And then you'll say that they misled you and they tricked you, etc. And they'll go back to that first section where it says that they will not be liable for misrepresentation or misstatements or any such tomfoolery. We may end the contract if you break it. You do not, within a reasonable time of us asking for it, provide us with information that is necessary to provide the products. Boy, they're really big on that information being provided. You do not, within a reasonable time, allow us access to your premises to supply the services. And of course, they also care a lot about that. You must compensate us if you break the contract. So you see, the payment and the money is not as important, according to this paperwork, as is information and access to locations. We shall have no liability to you in respect of a product's failure to comply with the warranty set out in clause 14.1. For the avoidance of doubt, this includes liability in respect of loss of data. That tells you exactly what they're planning to do is, quote, lose your data in a quote-unquote data breach, which they obviously established, and then under that pretext, they'll establish more controls through the so-called security breach cover story. Loss of goodwill or harm to reputation. So basically, they're saying after we do what we're planning on doing, which is something you're not going to like and will naturally damage your reputation, and people are going to blame you for it. Well, you can't blame us for what we did that causes you to be blamed for what happened, right? We can charge interest if you pay late. This is very common in these little creepy documents. Is they always love to embed interest charges so that they can establish liens, because they obviously won't let you pay off their phony debts ever. They'll follow you forever, and once you pay off the debt, they'll just sell it to a debt collector, and then it'll continue, and so on and so forth. And it's all about being able to leverage the claims against your quote-unquote property. We can charge interest if you pay late. If you do not make any payment to us, or we do not receive any payment from you by the due date, we may charge interest to you on an overdue amount of the rate of 8% a year, above the base lending rate in the Bank of England from time to time. This interest shall accrue on a daily basis from the due date until the date of actual payment of the overdue amount, whether before or after judgment. Judgment is a term when you go to court, you request a judgment so that you can place a lien on someone's property. It's exactly what they want to do here. They want to use some phony baloney, treasonous, conspiratorial, and wicked surveillance system products under the guise of safety and so forth, as a means to steal property, steal people's information, in which of course they would consider quote-unquote intellectual property, and at the same time, I mean, it's honestly the best word to describe this is conquest. This is conquest. If you do not make any payment to us, or we do not receive any payment from you by the due date, we may, without notice or liability to you, yeah, right, how could they make a claim like that? Disable your password, account, and access to all or part of the digital content, and we shall be under no obligation to provide any or all services or digital content until such payment has been made. Basically, they're going to steal your stuff, and then they're going to withhold your stuff and use it as a means to extort what they want. It's or coerce what they want. And essentially speaking, once it's been provided to them, they own it. They control it. It's theirs, according to them. When we are liable for damage caused by defective digital content regarding use of your personal information, it will be processed in accordance with the stipulations outlined in our cookie policy. So, of course, naturally, you have to go to other reference material to find out what that is. And that is a very common trick that people know, especially when someone's trying to hide something. They always like to make reference points, so you have to go to a different document. They don't tell you where in the other document to find it. You have to go dig through that document, and then you find other references to different documents, and so on and so forth. And they make a maze, or a picture puzzle, if you will, of elongated wording and complicated documents. Use of your personal information is subject to our privacy policy, which, again, another reference to a different section entirely, which outlines how we collect, use, and safeguard your data. Yeah, right. Rest assured well, as far as their own purposes go anyway, it becomes their data. Rest assured your privacy and the security of your personal information are of utmost importance to us. Of course they are, because that's the actual main piece of property that they are going after. We may transfer this agreement to someone else. That's awesome. We may transfer our rights and obligations under these terms to another organization. You cannot just transfer, quote, obligations or rights. That's crazy. But, they also use rights and obligations as collateral for loans, which is just weird. Now we get into the true motive, or motives, of these activities. The U.S. Federal Guidelines, PRISM, Mass Decontamination of Casualties. This is from June 2019, which is a very auspicious year, right before 2020. And if somebody doesn't know exactly what happened in 2020, they've been living under a rock. This is a .uk email. Talks publications at hertz.ac.uk. Large-scale exercise, Operation Downpour, Volunteers it's specified they're volunteers in compliant individuals. So were there non-compliant individuals? That's a question. And this lists at-risk volunteers, examples with chronic illness, disability, or language barrier, but this term of at-risk, like at-risk populations, at-risk people, that has been amplified to cover all sorts of groups, including military veterans, active duty or non-active duty. A more effective communication strategy is required for first responders. And then this lists at-risk casualties. So that tells you what their target is. Their target populations are at-risk populations, which includes military and veteran. They want to establish control over the communication of first responders, obviously. And they plan on implementing a so-called large-scale exercise with chemical warfare agents, as we shall see. The aim of this present study was to evaluate the clinical and operational benefits of the revised PRISM response process during a multi-agency large-scale exercise, Operation Downpour, performed in Rhode Island. Who knows if that's actually true or not. A proportion of volunteers represented at-risk casualties, the PRISM definition of which is individuals who are unable for any reason to comply with verbal instructions. Individuals who are for any reason unable to comply with verbal instructions. So if you're in a firefight and they're shooting you and you're shooting back, whoever's side these people are on, they will label those enemy elements as at-risk casualties, even if they're living or alive. That's insane, right? Stuff's so stupid. Global Positioning System GPS trackers were used to provide information on casualty flow and so provided an objective measure of operational effectiveness. So they're implementing this plan, or they were implementing this plan, somehow it got thwarted. And one of the main reasons for all of this surveillance is not simply control of people's behavioral habits, but also the ability to measure and effectively track the damage of the attacks that they're leveraging against this country and its people from afar. It's very interesting perspective. So you take the example of a game, chessboard, board game, video game, whatever, and you think about yourself as a player. And one of your objectives as a player is to input mechanisms so that you can identify your operational effectiveness, where you could send troops and route things around, and also make your plans for future things. A good way to think about this is that in a lot of video games you have what's called fog, sometimes fog of war, which is effectively speaking is an area of a map that you can't see. And you break that fog of war by sending out a little peon minion out there. In the context of this, they're video cameras. But in that strategy game, you'll send out a little peon into parts to scout parts of the of that area. It could be very dangerous and tricky doing that, of course. But if you're not worried about attack on yourself, because you think that you're separate from that, then you'll send out a whole bunch of peon minions to essentially dissipate the fog of war, so that way you can maneuver all your other pieces and see where you need to go. Anyway, that's a good way of thinking about this. They're trying to penetrate the fog of war by implanting these systems to track the effectiveness of their attacks, including economic attack on the country. The exercise was performed on August 3rd, 2017 at the University of Rhode Island's Ryan Center. The response teams and corresponding equipment were pre-deployed to the parking lot immediately to the north of Ryan Center. Methyl salicylate, 99% purity, and curcumin, 98%, were sourced from Acros Organics, Geel, Belgium. It's interesting how many foreign companies are always involved in this stuff. Propan 2-OL, acetonitril, methanol, and acetic acid, all high-performance liquid chromatography grade, were sourced from Fisher Scientific, Loughborough, UK. UK ionized water was produced in-house by filtration. Tap water through an Integral 3 water purified Millipore, Watford, UK. Disposable cotton towels. Scrummy from Fabric Smart Ltd, Kent, UK. Cotton washcloths, 30x30 cm. Amazon Basics from Amazon UK Services Ltd, London, UK. And Johnson & Johnson's baby shampoo and baby oil in the UK. GPS trackers, TK102 Nano GPS, were purchased from Rewire Security, Bristol, UK, and were used in conjunction with proprietary analytical software GPS Live Rem Trading Ltd, Bristol, UK. There we get our particular element of that terms and agreement that we just read is the Rewire Security or REM trading for GPS Live. The study was conducted in accordance with the principles of the Declaration of Helsinki. So some foreign declaration, whatever, like who cares, right? You know, these people are just implementing whatever crap they want, and they're all the internationalist creepos that going around and trying to manage the globe as their personal property, private property, and was independently approved by the University of Hertfordshire's Research Ethics Committee and the Rhode Island Department of Health Institutional Review Board. Lovely titles they have there. The packers provided to each volunteer contained relevant items, volunteer identification, number plate, and GPS tracker. The composition of the stimulant was chosen because methyl salicylate has been extensively used as a surrogate for lipophilic, medium volatility chemical warfare agents, e.g. sulfur mustard SOMON, and the fluorophore curcumin provided a non-invasive means of visually identifying or quantifying the area of exposure. And of course, this is all under the guise of stopping and all that stuff, but they always cause a problem. And then they want to control the solution so that they can make that problem worse. Now, in a biological attack, it's very important, or chemical, biological, neurological, or radiological attack, it's very important to control the mechanism and to ensure there's only one mechanism with which individuals can be relieved of that attack. That attack can be effectively neutralized. Not only that, I expect their plan was to use the so-called decontamination process as a way to ensure that those people would die, and then they can state that the decontamination process just didn't work as they planned or as well as they thought it would, right? Because they can just lie about whatever they want. But the ultimate goal here is to implement all these controls and mechanisms, not simply to perform an attack, but also to be able to gauge how effective it was. Ampula Ltd UK is listed here also, is Ultimaker BV Netherlands. Marshals were instructed not to transfer participants unless given a clear signal by the exercise player. That is a weird word to use. Marshal in general, as only used today, refers to field marshals, which is a rank in the military. But in here, they're using marshal in the practical term of it, which means somebody who marshals forces, somebody who goes out there and collects up people and gathers them together. Very odd that they're using that word, though, in this context. E1 HP 100 Series, Emergency 1 Inc., Ocala, Florida. There's a domestic company, at least. Elkhart Brass Manufacturing Company, Incorporated, Indiana. The command and supervision of fire department officers. Weird. That's a weird thing to term it. The command and supervision of fire department officers. So, like the command and supervision of officers in the Army or Navy or Air Force, right? Similar terminology, similar usage. FSI North America, Sheffield, Ohio. First responders attended a hot debrief, they put that in quotation marks, Immediately after the exercise, provide verbal feedback. Jeez, why would they use that term, hot debrief? To make it sound more dramatic. EOS ADD Canon UK Ltd Surrey UK. Version 10.31 Apple Incorporated Cupertino, California is mentioned, as is Wacom Intuos Pro Dusseldorf, Germany. Version 2017.1.1 Adobe Systems, San Jose, California. They're just listing out things that were used here. Chromalion version 7.2 Thermo Scientific or Thermo Scientific. And then moving on to the next section. Here we go. The GPS trackers provide an objective means of quantifying the time spent by volunteers at discrete stages of the exercise. And that will be it for these documents. So let's go ahead and comment on the fictitious cover front setup of Rewire Security, REM Trading Ltd, GPS Live, if those aren't complicated enough already. The actual company for Rewire Security is REM Trading Ltd, which is essentially speaking, you can think of like a holding company, and Rewire Security is the subset companies which are filed in the United States. REM Trading Ltd. was filed on February 27, 2008 with an address of Southfield House, 2 Southfield Road, Westbury, on Trim. I don't know what that means. ON, Oscar, November, Trim, Tango, Romeo, Yankee, Mike, Bristol, BS9, 3BH. That's the weird addresses they have in the UK. The agent is Duport Associates Limited with the same address. The secretary is Duport Secretary Limited, same address, and the director is Duport Director Limited, same address. So no actual individuals or people are associated with the company in the background, the third interested foreign third party. Purpose is general, commercial, and investment. Their overall purpose is not listed as telecommunications or tracking equipment or technology. That's the purpose for Rewire Security, which is listed in the United States, which is interesting. I think I may have, I don't know, but I think maybe in the last video I might have no, that was a Live View Securities I did in the last video for theirs. So these are separate business filings. Duport Phils, that would be Fox India Lima Sierra, November 6, 2023. So that's the name of the company, is Duport Phils, with a listed address of 25448 Stallion Branch Terrace, Chantilly, Virginia, 20152, or 20152. That's the zip code for Virginia. Lists a Charles Bourgeois, that's Bravo, Oscar, Uniform, Romeo, Golf, Echo, Oscar, India, Sierra, same address. Lists Systematic Advantage LLC and Systematic Investors LLC. I couldn't find those companies, supposed companies anyway. However, I went down the rabbit trail of Charles Bourgeois and came up with Charles Bourgeois L.L.C. 126 Market Street, Donaldsonville, Louisiana, 70346. C-O or C-O, Charles Bourgeois, same address. I believe that's contact. C-O stands for contact, like care of. Tri-State Police and Fire Sales Service, 140 Main Avenue, Apartment 13, Nitro, West Virginia, 25143. May 1st, 2008, Charles N. Bourgeois. This, of course, is interesting that these names connect specifically to the elements which are being quote-unquote supplied with this equipment. Chuck's Fire and Safety, Charles N. Bourgeois, 1422 North Chapel, Apartment 8, Louisville, Ohio, 44641, March 21st, 1995. Of course, the likelihood there of all of those details matching up, first of all, both addresses have apartments on them. Both are involved with fire and safety. Both have the name associated with Duport, which of course is associated with REM Trading, which is associated with Rewire, which is associated with GPS Live, etc. And they were filed in 1995 and 2008, respectively. Now, here's a weird one. Industrial Engineering Bureau. That's a name for you. December 23rd, 1921. Albert and Charles Bourgeois. Empire Building, 13th and Walnut Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. One has to wonder if maybe this name, Charles Bourgeois, has been used for a long time as a fictitious identity. And now we have VYVLLL, that's 3 L's, P. Normally there's 2 L's and a P for LLP. This is 3 L's and a P. Would make it hard to find. June 19th, 2018, 1639, Habershaw Drive, Northwest, Atlanta, Georgia, 30318, a Charles Bourgeois listing the same address. Willendorf Systems Incorporated, June 29th, 2012, at 25448 Stallion Branch Terrace, Chantilly, Virginia, 20152. Charles Bourgeois is listed here, mind you with a T, Charles T. Bourgeois, at 8409 Lee Highway Unit 906, Merrifield, Virginia, 22116. So what's the likelihood that this Willendorf, first of all, that's a name for you, Willendorf Systems, I mean, think about the name, is located in Chantilly, as is the Charles Bourgeois LLC. Wait, no, that's in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. The one in Chantilly is Duport Phils. Duport Phils, which is the name for all the secretary, director, and agents is Duport for REM Trading, Ltd. Duport Phils is listed in Chantilly, Virginia, at that Stallion Branch Terrace, as is Willendorf Systems Incorporated, listed at that Stallion Branch Terrace in Chantilly, Virginia, with the Charles Bourgeois. Now, if that doesn't just wrap the package up nicely to see exactly what we're dealing with, the hidden hands and the front organizations and the line and all of the cloak and dagger is confirmation that these surveillance tracking systems are in place by foreign enemy third-party operatives with the design to implement a CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, neurological attack upon the country and the people. I think it's obvious. There's no reason, well, okay, I should say maybe not no reason, but that is a perfect reason to explain the level of fraud and fake identification being implemented here, and for lack of a better word, hiding. That explains all of the hiding in the paperwork. It is a malicious, villainous, treasonous, and in all respects, evil plan or operational motive to be carried out against us.